Good Friday, April 9, 1993. At this spot on the dark Main Street, her body was found. Monica Reece was her name. She was 19 years old. In this, the first edition of Prime Conversations, we revisit this crime, which remains unsolved for 28 years. We talked to Shirley Reece, a mother who lost 2 children, her eldest daughter, to a crime in which several high society characters were persons of interest. The then crime chief Winston Felix, who walked us through the years-long investigation that remains open since no one has been charged. 2 journalists who covered the crime tracked down several leads and often clashed with the police over the treatment of the investigation. Tonight, we also explore where this investigation is now and whether or not this crime will ever be solved.
The head was in the general direction of east, and the legs are pointing more towards a west-southwest area. The body was lying almost like, well, on the back, right? The head on the ground. It was close to the drain, and the head was in a pool of blood, some of which began to drain. That's why I pointed out to you that ridge was not there, because the blood was draining straight off the road into the drain.
Reece's body was found on the eastern side of the western carriageway on Main Street. It was suspected that Reece either fell out, was pushed out, or tried to escape from what was then referred to as a 4x4 vehicle. When the police arrived on the scene that night in 1993, her head laid in a pool of blood, the former crime chief at that time recalled. Reece was clad in a black pair of leggings, top that partially covered her tummy, and a pair of sandals. Felix, along with government pathologist Dr. Leslie Mutu, fellow investigative officer Michael Marks, and an officer attached to the Brickdown police station were all on the scene.
Dr. Mutu examined the body and found at this scene that there were broken bones at the back of her head, which was resting on the ground, and that segments of her hair were broken and left on the ground.
Monica Reece was a security guard attached to Loss Prevention Services, a now defunct security agency. She was an outgoing and normal 19-year-old, her mother Shirley Reece recalled.
Very loving, a very caring person. She always smiling. She was very happy. You know that if she goes to buy something for herself, she has to buy 2. She buy 1 for 2 1.
Shirley lives outside of Guyana now and would only agree to do an audio interview. She told us that she left the country after 2 incidents in which she felt threatened to her life. Shirley would have last seen Monica the week before her death.
Friday before, she went and had dinner, and she was going to work, and we went and had dinner. And then she said, Mommy, next week Friday, I'm passing me out to the house because she was staying by her friend, her close friend. We got to them to celebrate the same birthday together. She said, Mommy, I'm coming home. I said, okay, and I was looking for her that night.
Monica did not live with her mother, but it was this photograph that she gave her mother that would be etched in the memories of many who followed this story. Back to Good Friday 1993. Reece ended her security shift at a location on Brickdown. She had gone to the work in Rust office of the security agency. Police told us that based on investigations, she spent some time at the office with the hope of using the telephone. When she left, she was dropped off in Brickdown.
Then we traced her to Trumpyard, where she met a friend. The friend took her to Border Market. They purchased fruits, and they went to some house in Alberton or Queenstown where they had some amorous moments, right? Then they came back to in the vicinity of Trump Yard, and she left wanting to make a call, which was around 5 o'clock or thereabout. We traced her to Rob and King Streets. Apparently, she did make a call based on what she told the man she next went to, because after that call, she went to Charlotte and King Streets to this cycle repairer, whom she allegedly told that she got this boyfriend by ethnicity, and this boyfriend is Beachy, right? She just call you, and or she just make a call, a lady answer, and she apparently was annoyed. So she asked the man to use his phone, I think it was a landline then, to call the same number she called. A male allegedly answered and was a little unhappy. And so she left and came back in what we believe to have been the direction of Trump Yard.
Based on police reports, eyewitnesses in the vicinity of the St. George's Cathedral recall seeing a man and a woman in a vehicle, the two persons having a loud disagreement, but no one could identify the woman nor the man in the vehicle.
The persons there did say that this 4x4 passed with two persons quarreling loudly. The vehicle came around North Road and into Avenue of the Republic going north. And then it made a left around Bank of Guyana and a left around the Cenotaph to come into Main Street. A female resident of Tiger Bay who had ascended the concrete pillar at Bank of Guyana claimed that she saw two people struggling or fighting in the front seat. Now the other person we could have relied on was a lady in the avenue who said that, contrary to the other lady, that the vehicle came on the right side of the Cenotaph and entered Avenue of the Republic. All she knows was a 4x4, dark colored, brownish color. She recognized two numbers, a 4, I think, a 4 and a 2 or something like that. But we don't know in what order those numerals were placed.
The then Prime Chief Felix said that even with those witnesses, there were still very little clues to work with that would help identify a key piece of evidence, narrowing down the vehicle. Over the years, the police were certain about a few aspects of this crime. Reece was in a vehicle. That vehicle never stopped, and she had a fractured jaw, an injury she sustained before she died.
The discovery of Reece's body was carried in the two countries' dailies at that time. About 2 days after, coverage of the murder investigations would pick up in the days to come, and saw highly competitive coverage between the privately owned Starbrick News and the state-owned Guyana Chronicle.
Every day we'd be competing. Headline. Some very sensational, some I, in retrospect, might have scared off certain people. I know you did it, scared off certain people. And it was, we wanted to solve the crime, but also at the same time, this is competition. Who carries the story and whose paper going to be read?
I was a 22-year-old journalist trying to write what was the biggest story at the time, without much experience or much real skill at it. We were just junior kids at the time. So looking back and trying to pick my memory about that time, like, I wonder what kind of journalist I would have been now writing that story all these years later with, so much experience and so much, time to think about it. And in '93, this Monica Reece story landed in our laps. It had all the hallmarks of one of these, stories that play well with, there was a human interest angle, there was a murder, there were some local Guyana celebrities attached to it. So at the time, it was a big story.
Woman dies after being hurled from a vehicle.
And this was April 11, 1993.
Yes.
This is the first story written about Monica Reece. What are some of the things that stand out about this story?
First, There are very few details, and you get a case where a woman is thrown from a vehicle, and one would expect you to see a photograph. One would expect to see a lot more details if there's a suspect, a name, etc. And this story has nothing about it, which is quite surprising.
Ryan Lorine was attached to Starbrick News and Michael Jordan to the Guyana Chronicle. Their articles, along with others, columns, page 1 comments, and editorials, would keep Monica Reece's name on the front page for months to come.
We had this hue and cry in the media about we're not pursuing this lead and that lead, which caused the commissioner at the time to say, pull in all the 4x4s. So we went on a 4x4 operation that did not turn up too much.
Crime journalist and author Michael Jordan told us that he thought it was an easy case to solve at the time.
But the case kept dragging on with the commissioner of police, Larry Lewis, holding press conference after press conference. With the first one he held, he said, "We will solve this crime." I remember that very, very clearly. So we thought we would solve the crime.
Here is one headline: Cops closer to solving Reece's case.
Yes, cops closer to solving this case. And I remember people starting to tease me about this story. You know, the guys say, "When you are solving Monica Reece's case," as if I was responsible.
The media had criticized the police for a lack of information. The police also criticized the media. The story took on a life of its own, with anybody and everybody who heard anything coming forward, but none of that information was valuable enough to help solve the crime. Over the weeks and months, there were stories of how a then popular race car driver allegedly sped after the vehicle. That angle did not seem possible to the police. Then there were stories centered on Reece's life and whether she was known in the so-called high society circles. There was even speculation about whether or not her death was linked to a cocaine bust at that time.
Larry Lewis was the commissioner of police at the time. And I remember distinctly going to Eve Leary at the height of it for a press conference one afternoon. It was like 3 p.m, super hot. We were trying to get information out of the police. And I remember Larry Lewis pointing at me and admonishing me for sensationalizing this story. And, just like they were not happy that Starbrick News had a lead story on it every day for maybe a month in 1993. Even if it wasn't the lead story, it was on the front page. We were actively following up. Getting information from the police was impossible. This is pre-Twitter, pre-Facebook, pre-YouTube, none of the stuff that's available today. We were just kind of trying to figure out what was going on. The police wasn't talking at all, as usual. And we decided we were trying to investigate this and run a parallel investigation alongside the police force. Again, keep in mind, we were young journalists, very inexperienced journalists. So I'm sure there was like a lot of mistakes made. But at the time, we were basically just chasing down the folks that the police had interviewed, and we were going to interview them afterwards and trying to piece the story together based on the questions I was asked by the police.
The police then issued a blackout on information as officers tried to understand Reece's last moments with the aim of finding the person who was in the vehicle with her. What the police knew was that Reece was trying desperately to contact someone that day. She waited around her office for a call. She tried to make a call from 2 different locations. The police had tracked down a man whom she gave a number to as she tried to make contact with someone. But this man told the police that the paper with the number was destroyed as he washed his clothing. The police also had a very interesting lead.
A businessman somewhere in Communist Street told us that he got to know of this incident from a man, I think the media had referred to him as Torres. And Torres said words to this effect, that a body just fall out of a vehicle, of a big one-son vehicle on Main Street. Who is the big one-son? We don't know.
That man, Roll-Ups McKay, known as Tourist, was a vagrant. He reportedly slept in and around Main Street. He died at the Georgetown Public Hospital. He was said to be asthmatic. The Starbrick News had reported that he did not give a statement to the police, and then Crime Chief Winston Felix confirmed as much. The police found out about his alleged statement only after he died. There were speculations about whether Tourist was poisoned. A post-mortem ruled this out. Over the weeks, the investigation saw a few developments. This included the police reining in on vehicles of a certain type. Several persons were then interviewed. The police then zoomed in on 4 persons of interest.
One was a member of the family of a rich and famous family. One, who we had an interest in. And I am told, and we were told during the investigation, that he came here the night and looked at the body after hearing what happened. 2 others, listen to this, had connections with persons who held constitutional offices. The last one, 4th one, was the son of a cambio dealer.
This person was eventually ruled out for 2 reasons. The hairbrush in his vehicle was proven to be that of his girlfriend. The police said too that an undercover United States officer sent a notarized statement that this man was in his company at the time of the incident. Now, 3 persons were of interest to the police.
The vehicle number, the numbers we had, sort of put us in the direction of the rich and famous son. Now, he was arrested. We had him at CID headquarters. We make a whole set of knives, and his lawyer came with a habeas corpus. So we had to release him. The constitutional office holder, his nephew, we interviewed him. He said that on the night in question, because he has a 4x4, which according to the general description we had, resembled that of the one in which Reece allegedly was thrown from. Mm-hmm. Now, in interviewing him, he said that on the very night, listen to this, he left Georgetown and proceeded to Puerto Rico, where he caught a boat to the interior. Now, give it some truth. But we know after a certain hour what happens at Puerto Rico, unless there was a special boat and going to Bartico. So, but the interview was disrupted by the presence, unannounced presence of the constitutional office holder. I go no further. The other constitutional office holder, he came into being because he was in a circle of friends that associated with Monica Reece. And he also had a Hilux server.
When the investigation paused at that time, Felix said that the police were now left to make that link between one of the 3 persons of interest, the vehicle, and Reece. Journalist and author Michael Jordan has written extensively about unsolved murders in Guyana. He had investigated and written about Reece's death over the years.
I hate unsolved crimes. I hate the fact that there is somebody out there who thinks that they're bigger than the law. You could callously dump a woman on the road and get away with it for whatever reason. At the time, there were questions about whether there was a cover-up. I didn't go with that. I didn't know. I was quite naive then. But later on, the suggestions came from not from the public, but from some sections of the police force.
Yeah, I read some stories you would have written recently.
Mm-hmm. So I kept on the case. I kept to this day. But I'm losing and getting discouraged, because the last word we heard from the then present crime chief was that they're opening back this case. And, they put the file back together and they were looking for a particular person to question. The prime suspect was not being allowed to leave the country without permission. So I said, hey, one day I might write suspect charge. But somewhere along the line, something seems to have happened and no one is saying what has happened.
Based on the work that you have not only done in this period, over the years, based on your engagement with the police, you've retraced the crime, her last hours, you have spoken to potential witnesses and persons. Is it possible that this crime can still be solved?
Solved for me, and I
As
think
in
solved for the
somebody
police means
charged.
somebody can be charged, but the question remains, will they have enough evidence to convict?
Former Crime Chief Winston Felix told us that the case started off with very little information, but that the officers did what they could have at the time to tie all the pieces together. Even with that, there are still some unanswered questions.
Whose vehicle? Whose vehicle? Who was the driver of the vehicle at the time? Those things we have not yet been able to clear. Who is this man who cuffed her? Why was she so anxious during the night to get on to somebody on the telephone that she was traversing Trump Yard, Rab and King Street, Charlotte and King Street, and then she went back in that direction? What was it? We don't have answers to that. We don't have answers to that.
In 2016, the police announced the reopening of Reece's investigation. Then, Commissioner of Police Acting David Ramnarine offered this comment at the time when asked about the case at a press conference.
During Commissioner Prasad's time when he was here, prior to going on leave, and the crime chief, Mr. Blanham, at a different time would have indicated that a review of that investigation, if I were to put it that way, a review of that investigation was being done. It's still under review because the first review revealed, and this is putting it rather mildly, as I've just said earlier, clearly indicated that an unprofessional course of action was taken in that year and that period when that matter was under investigation, and I'll say no more about it.
While there are still no details on what that course of action was, it was posited that the action could have been an interruption to the police interview with one of the prime suspects by a then constitutional office holder.
Reece's case file is currently being examined by the investigators at the Cold Case Unit, Crime Chief Wendell Blanham told us. The Crime Chief said that several persons of interest were re-interviewed. The police also re-interviewed senior investigators who worked on the case.
Crime Chief Mr. Blanham said that investigators had received valuable information, but the investigation was stalled again when investigators were reassigned. The crime chief said that with that change, it has been an uphill task to convince those individuals who were cooperating with the investigators once again. Former crime chief Winston Felix feels that the case can still be solved.
All that has to be done now is to link the deceased with one of the three. Which one that would be, I don't know. You have to link one of those persons in whom we have an interest with the vehicle. So there has been a vehicle. There was a boyfriend whose identity remains unmasked. And that boyfriend, the vehicle, and Monica Reece on that night in question. Once those links are made and the evidence in between is solidified, we have a case to charge somebody.
Shirley Reece wants closure. She lights a candle for her daughter every year on this night. What you would like to see happen? It's been 28 years after. What would you like?
I would like to see somebody get charged or something that is just so open now.
Whether Monica's death will ever be solved is a mystery in itself. Monica would have been 47 years old this year, and as you heard her mother Shirley, she's hopeful that this case will still be solved. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Prime Conversations.